Hey Florian, great to see you again. Just for the benefit of myself and the listeners, would you mind giving us a little bit of an introduction as to sort of Apricum, what you guys are doing at the moment?
Absolutely, and likewise, thanks for having me here. So yeah, what is Apricum? Apricum, we are a strategy consultancy and transaction advisory firm. And what makes us different from most of the other guys around that space is that we are exclusively focusing on renewables and clean tech. So what's that? Renewables, that's more or less all the typical types of renewable energy generation technologies, solar PV, wind, more prominent ones, but also geothermal energy, waste to energy, and whatever is out there. And on the other hand, clean tech. So that's, according to our definition, everything that goes with renewables in one way or the other in a combination, or contributing to making renewable happen, such as energy storage, hydrogen, also green mobility, and digital energy, to name a few. So we are supporting, on the one hand, helping companies with their strategies to grow in the space. So we are focusing on growth-oriented services only, no downsizing and restructuring, but we are in the nice position to work in the industry that is growing. So we help to enter new markets, understand technologies better, review strategies, and help with our expertise here. And on the other hand, we are helping or we acting as a boutique investment bank, supporting on M&A, sell side, buy side, fundraising, and also project finance. And I think that is really what makes us most different, that we're offering a unique blend of expert strategy advice in combination with investment banking proficiency. And as a third aspect, the deep technical and market understanding that comes with that exclusive focus on these segments.
Yeah, no, fantastic. And obviously, with a stint in sort of the MBB consulting firm McKinsey as well, you've sort of gained, I suppose, many years in this space from a consulting point of view. I mean, do you want to just tell me a little bit about that, sort of from the renewables industry? What's it like in a sort of consultancy kind of view, sort of having a bit of a bird's eye view, I'd imagine?
Yeah, I mean, in general, from a very high-flying bird's view, what we are seeing is that renewable energy and clean tech is very hot.
Yeah.
Very big spoiler. So we see our services in high demand. We are growing quite rapidly, recruiting as much as we can. Still not finding enough good people. So in general, across all our sectors, there's a very high demand. I mean, I'm focusing myself mostly on energy storage and green hydrogen. So if you want, I can give some examples on what we are working on. And sorry?
But yeah, please do. Please.
Yeah, absolutely. No, happy to do so. Because, I mean, it also, I think I find it always interesting. I mean, I guess as consultants active in the space and working with a lot of different global players, I mean, by the type of engagements that we are hired for, you're already getting, and also if you connect the dots, a little bit of an understanding what's on the top of the heads of the industry players, and you know what's hard, what are the headaches, and where things are going. I think one project we have done sometimes in the more recent past is helping manufacturers of both electrolyzers, so for the production of green hydrogen, and also battery energy storage systems. So these are the full systems, not only the battery, but also the related equipment, to design their next generation products. And I mean, this sounds, first of all, like a very technical exercise, but and in a way it is, right? So you need to understand the key product characteristic to cluster the technologies and the related analysis. That's for sure. So for example, you need to understand how an electrolyzer works, how a battery energy storage system or BESS works, system power, centralization, and so on and so on. But in order to understand really what's important, so what are really how the next generation product should look like and what's driving these changes, you have to be able to understand the markets. You have to understand what competitors are doing, and again, connect the dots, get the big picture, and derive a conclusion from there. And just, I mean, to maybe name or to give you some examples here on the electrolyzer side, for example, there's quite some downward pressure on the production cost of hydrogen. So everyone tries to get that down. It becomes competitive even without subsidies. So electrolyzer projects try to benefit from economies of scale, and this favors a certain setup of the system and certain products that play to it. So, for example, centralized components for gas purification or also water treatment, which are quite expensive if you use them centralized and not in a decentralized fashion. You can save a lot of money. And therefore, a lot of players switch from an integrated to a more centralized topology while increasing also the nominal system power. And a similar thing is also true when we're looking at the BESS manufacturing space here. It's also for getting costs down of the system, as it's a more mature market yet. So there's a lot of competition on the cost side, and also on an easier and faster deployment, because as it's a mature industry and the energy storage market is completely hot. We're in the middle of the decade of energy storage. So it's also very important to get things to the ground fast. And that's why there's a high degree of system standardization that we are seeing, particularly with the largest players such as Fluence, Tesla, and Wärtsilä. They are shifting to more and more prefabricated and by that also modular cabinets with only a few configuration options. And again, also centralized aspects, as I mentioned before, in this case, more for the PCS, helps to get the cost down. So these are the kind of things we are looking at. And yeah, as you can see, that's this is a project type where we are I think can fully play to our strengths of having all these aspects together. So be able to look both all at technologies, at economics, and also on the overall market trends.
Yeah, absolutely. I think hydrogen as I guess as a topic, very much goes up against sort of battery, or in sort of goes up against sort of electric vehicles, that sort of market. I mean, what are the applications of sort of hydrogen, or maybe the applications of you're specifically focusing on?
I mean, we are focusing. We do not have a specific focus here, right? So whatever is interesting for our clients, we have a look at. Having that does not mean that we are saying each application is as good as the other. And I think this is where we see our biggest value we can add to our clients, to really help them to sort out what's hot and what's not, right? So I mean, hydrogen is extremely hyped market, as you probably know. There is a massive amount of money available from subsidies, and right now everything is driven actually by state support and subsidies, such as the IRA in the US or the let's say respective counter IRA in the EU. But of course, it's a bit dangerous if you just blindly follow the money here, and because if let's say subsidies are not well applied, and there might be other solutions, low carbon solutions, I have to say, which might be more suited. And hydrogen can do the same thing, but there are other solutions available, non-hydrogen solutions that can do the same thing and cheaper. You might be able to still deploy your solution as long as there are subsidies, but as the industry learns and matures, there will be a day where things will not be, there will be no state support anymore. And then there's, of course, a high risk to have stranded assets and, a big risk of investing in the wrong thing.
Yeah, and obviously you mentioned sort of funding and sort of back. I mean, my next question really is sort of ties into that really. I mean, what are the main challenges you see or you see in this space?
In what space?
Hydrogen, sorry.
In hydrogen. I mean, I think yes, there are a lot of challenges. I mean, first of all, the competitiveness of, I mean, sorry, one step back, right? I mean, there are, like, I call it the 50 shades of hydrogen, right? There are all these different colors meaning something different. There's I mean, gray hydrogen, black hydrogen, these things which have been there forever, and but which are creating carbon emissions, and therefore are to be replaced with other low carbon hydrogen types, such as green, under certain conditions, also blue and turquoise. But let's focus on green for the time being. So here, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is to get costs down to an amount that makes the application of green hydrogen competitive to the incumbent CO2 heavy solutions. And yeah, so so whatever the green hydrogen is replacing, that there should be cost competitiveness, but also the resulting products have to be able to produce in a way that they can compete with products that are let's say are made in the conventional way, and then with the cost of CO2 applied to that. Because I mean, that is of course a major driver for green hydrogen. If there's a fair pricing of negative externalities such as pollution, I mean, for a long time it was for free to blow CO2, or almost free to blow CO2 into the air. If that's priced fairly, that's a step in the right direction. But in most cases, it's still probably not sufficient to compete with green hydrogen on a pure cost comparison. So I think that's a big problem. Then it's of course a question where to produce enough green hydrogen to meet the demand. Here, of course, there's also a caveat. Right now, there are extremely high numbers expected for demand of hydrogen. I think hydrogen will be a very important puzzle piece in the decarbonization puzzle, but will demand be as big as some associations like to make the industry believe? That's still to be sorted out, because again, there are some sectors which there might be probably different solutions, or they will become tangible much later on the timeline, as probably the lower hanging fruits are harvested first, right? But if, again, still, even if you reduce that number a little bit, it's you have to produce enough green hydrogen. What's the problem with that? You need renewable energy for that, otherwise it's not green. So this requires a lot of renewable energy generation facilities. And as you know, there is a big ramp up, for example, in Europe and other geographies. But there's also, it's not the only need, is not only for hydrogen. We want to decarbonize the power system. We want to decarbonize transport, and for battery electric vehicles, you need the electricity as well. So this creates quite a competition for the available renewable energy, and therefore it will, and which also, by the way, has an impact then, of course, on the price for renewable energy, which then drives up the cost for green hydrogen again, which, talking about importing hydrogen from other geographies, which comes with a whole bunch of other problems, because hydrogen cannot be transported very efficiently, in particular not if you want to transform whatever medium you're using, such as ammonia, back into hydrogen. If you use hydrogen to convert it into green ammonia and then ship it somewhere and use it as green ammonia, that's more feasible than changing it back. So pipelines are good solutions, but try to build a pipeline from Brazil to Europe. So that's of course difficult.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. And you mentioned obviously some like applications like transport and sort of in the vehicular sort of sectors, I guess. But what are the other applications of hydrogen? What other sectors do you think they would become almost dominant? Is that the right word to use, or I guess regular? Or I think yeah.
Yeah, I think we should focus. Or I mean, again, so if there's a market distortion, a lot of subsidies available, then it can be that the hydrogen is applied in all kind of sectors, right? I mean, you can of course force it. You can force a flow of hydrogen flowing in a certain direction. If we take a step back and look at, let's say, the most logical use cases, I think everything around industrial applications is certainly something to look for. So most importantly, steel. I think green steel. There was a report I was just reading about yesterday from Agora, the German think tank, where they were comparing CO2 emissions of let's say different technologies of hydrogen with other solutions compared to the incumbent solution. And green steel was certainly something where you could save a lot of emissions by changing the current process to something that goes over directly reduced iron through the use of green hydrogen. But also other applications in refineries. Ammonia for sure. I mean, ammonia is something, black ammonia, which is generated from very polluting sources. My understanding is that if you would replace all of the global ammonia production, black ammonia production, with green ammonia, and I think you could use green hydrogen for quite a long time before you have reached that target, because a lot of ammonia, it's a basic fertilizer, which is needed all across the world. So if you would replace all of that, it would be already decreasing global CO2 emissions by 1%. I think that's already quite something. So this is, I think, a main application using hydrogen as a chemical, so to say. Using hydrogen as a fuel for transport and so on can make sense, but you have to be a bit careful here where it really makes sense. And I think there are a lot of risks associated to alternative low carbon solutions, as I indicated before. If you ask me, I would always focus on use cases first where there are no real other low carbon alternatives. So the only way to decarbonize that process, that application, is with hydrogen, full stop. Then it can be expensive, but again, if you want to go net zero, 100% emission free, if you want, you will have to apply hydrogen. If you look at something else where hydrogen could make sense or not, and it depends a bit, a lot on also the application of batteries in transport, not only for passenger vehicles, but also trucks. There might be also technological advancements on the battery side, and combined with the momentum battery electric vehicles have from the passenger vehicle side, there's at least a certain risk, right? I mean, it can make sense for heavy trucking. There are definitely applications today, but then again, maybe there'll also be a world where people say, let's go all in for batteries. We already have the factories. We have to invest in charging infrastructure for passenger vehicles anyway. So let's build on that for also making the trucking based on batteries.
Absolutely, and I think obviously sectors maybe where hydrogen probably will come into its own would be sort of maybe shipping, like aerospace. Are you seeing any movement your side with these kind of
Sure.
sectors?
I mean, there are a lot of also companies focusing on that. So again, everyone is focusing on everything. If you go to a hydrogen conference, there will be a session for all of these aspects, for all of these use cases, and someone standing there saying that's exactly what we should use hydrogen for. So there's definitely a lot of attention for the sector. But again, combining all what I've said with production has to ramp up, and lower hanging fruits, right? If you combine these two, I think there's probably some use cases that are likely to be addressed earlier because they will become economically viable earlier and it's easier and there are no other solutions for decarbonization. And then there are others where probably things are a bit shifted down the road. That doesn't mean there should not be R&D and you should, of course, test different solutions. But I would also say you have to be careful because you should not lose focus, right? If sometimes you hear the notion, yeah, but we cannot focus just on one thing. Let's try out everything. I mean, it's depending what's your perspective is on climate change. But where I'm standing, I think time is of essence. So if there's one thing we do not have, it's time. So I think it's a bit risky in, I don't know, directing money flows to potentially the wrong case and then finding out in 10 years, then it's probably too late. So I think a sober assessment should be done, and a selection of really the right use cases should be done as well from the subsidy side, but also, of course, from private companies. And yeah, that's where Apricum is, of course, also here to help to really sort out what to focus on and what to invest in. So not only from a profitability perspective, but also for the sake of making the energy transition efficient.
Perfect. And I guess just going to throw this out to you, Florian, before we wrap up. I suppose what would your sort of short-term, I guess, sort of predictions be, sort of next 5 years, sort of 10 years for hydrogen in your best guess? What's your sort of short-term and long-term predictions for this industry?
I mean, it's of course a broad question. I think in the short term we will see, as it's the case for all the different industries, right? In also in energy storage and in PV, it was the same way to a certain extent. I mean, regulation are sorted out also on a global scale. There will be some clearer definitions, clearer frameworks to make to give some security for investment. For example, the definition, what is green hydrogen, and probably also getting rid of these, as I called it before, 50 shades of hydrogen, these color coding, but rather going through categorization that's not based on colors, but rather on emissions related to it. So I think that's one thing. Then I think there will be an increasing education also of the industry, because right now it's, I think for a lot of industry participants, it's difficult to sort out what's right and what's not. So a lot of numbers are flowing around. Everyone claims some figures, and it's of course always hard to challenge it, because then you have to but in that report it was stated like that, and that report was stated like that. It was same like in energy storage before. There was really let's say a standard definition also for the levelized cost of energy storage to compare energy storage technologies in a fair way. So before that was the case, I still remember everyone was claiming something different, what should be in that cost. And then, of course, you could, let's say, tweak the figures as you need it. And I think there is still a lot of work to be done in hydrogen to create these common understanding and commonly accepted reality of what's right and what's not. So I think this is still coming. And then I would expect also in the short term that the hydrogen production in particular is finally really kicking off through these really fundamental governmental programs, which basically make up for green hydrogen not being viable or competitive on a pure market-driven way. So I think that's going to kick off some or quite some production capacities. However, right now it's still very, very complicated to apply for these funding. So I just came back from a conference in Rotterdam, and I heard conference participants rightfully complaining that with the current structures, it will be impossible to reach the targets until 2030, because it will take years, 7, 8, even longer years, more years to get a project realized based on the current system. And at that time, I think, based on this education, actually, hydrogen will move from just being on the paper to real projects. I think that will also increase the learning, and also probably the current hype will be probably replaced by a certain soberness, which is, I think, a very good process in every industry at this stage, than to really understanding, okay, there are probably a few things that are not working out. Let's focus on the other, and go for that. Then for the coming for the years in the second timeline that you mentioned, I know in 5 years to 10 years.
10 years, yeah, in the future.
Exactly. But I mean, at the end of the day, it will depend. Everything along hydrogen, and in particular on hydrogen, I think will depend on, will governments stick to these ambitious decarbonization targets? So that's, of course, a key prerequisite. If we will experience, I don't know, in 5 years or so, I don't know, government saying, look, we will not meet these targets anyway, let's focus on just dealing with the impact of climate change. I mean, I don't hope that, but you never know. Or they're kicking down the can and targets are moved to 2040 or later. I mean, I think the key prerequisite for all decarbonization technologies, but probably hydrogen even more, is that we will stick to these targets, and we should. And then I'm pretty sure that hydrogen will play or has its role, and at least significant role also in the whole decarbonization game.
No, understood. And yeah, well, thank you very much for your time, Florian. Thank you for appearing on the podcast. It's been great to speak with you. And yeah, we hope we can have you on again.
Absolutely, I would be happy to do so.